On this episode of Old Joe's Reminiscence, when four interstellar astronauts slumber in suspended animation, they are in for a rude awakening. Planet of the Apes is a 1968 major motion picture shot from a screenplay adapted loosely based on a 1963 French novel. Producer Arthur Jacobs was so impressed that he bought the film rights before the novel ever went to press, and by 1964 he had a deal to produce it. The Twilight Zone's Rod Serling was assigned to write the screenplay. Serling wrote more than 30 drafts over more than a year, desperately trying to bring the novel to the big screen. His futuristic ape society was deemed too costly to film as written, so they decided to go with a more primitive culture. They brought Michael Wilson in to make changes. John T. Kelly did a final uncredited dialogue polish before filming began in May of 1967. The original film was quite a success. In fact, so much so that 4 additional films followed. They were Beneath the Planet of the Apes in 1970, Escape from the Planet of the Apes in 1971, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes in 1972, and Battle for the Planet of the Apes in 1973. I'm sure most of you have seen the award-winning blockbuster The Planet of the Apes by now. If not, watch it before I spoil the ending for you, because I'm going to dive deep into this motion picture that blew up the TV network ratings. People were going ape over anything Planet of the Apes after the original film hit theaters in 1968. It was one of the first motion pictures to have a major merchandising tie-in campaign, which brought in somewhere around $100 million. There were toys, collectibles, action figures, even a lunchbox. The film spent 3 weeks as the #1 top-grossing film. Even the CBS television network took notice. They bought the broadcast rights to the Apes films, and, with much fanfare, CBS debuted the Planet of the Apes on network TV on Friday night, September 14th, 1973. It was a bit too long to fit the standard 2-hour movie slot, but then too short for 2.5 hours. Following the movie, they filled time with a hyped-up special, a behind-the-scenes documentary showing the process of applying the ape makeup. That's when I first saw the film, and I remember seeing that special, too. I was 14 at the time, with very few interests. When I wasn't watching TV, I was emulating Evel Knievel on my dirt bike, and I have the spinal compression fractures to remind me. We open with a shot of an astronaut recording a message back to Earth. After 6 months in deep space, the chronometer shows 1972. You can tell he's from 1970s Earth because he's smoking a cigar in his spaceship. His first name is never spoken, but in the credits it lists George Taylor. This opening scene was the last one to be filmed since Charlton Heston had a beard for the majority of the film. He'd shaved it off near the picture's climax. The starring role was reportedly offered to Burt Lancaster, and Marlon Brando was also considered. But the producer claimed that Charlton Heston was always his first choice for the part.
Charlton Heston was born John Charles Carter on October 4, 1923 in Illinois. Charlton was his grandmother's maiden name. He went by Charlton Carter while growing up. When Charlton was 10, his parents divorced. His mother then married Chester Heston. That's when Charlton took his stepfather's last name, becoming Charlton Heston. He broke his nose playing football in high school. He said it gave him the profile of an eagle. He took drama classes in high school and college. During college he played the lead in a 16mm independent film. In 1944 Charlton got married and joined the Army Air Force, serving in bombers based in the Aleutians. After the war, Charlton and his wife lived in New York City. There he worked his way into the theater and got some supporting roles on Broadway. That led to film roles. He played the lead in his first professional film, Dark City in 1950. Being cast in Cecil B. DeMille's Best Picture of 1952, The Greatest Show on Earth got him noticed. DeMille then cast Heston to play Moses in the 1956 blockbuster The Ten Commandments. He won the Best Actor award for his performance in the title role of Ben-Hur in 1959. Charlton Heston was a standout for roles in Planet of the Apes, The Omega Man, and many more. He was an outspoken political activist and president of both the Screen Actors Guild and the NRA. Charlton Heston died on April 5, 2008 at the age of 84.
They'd launched from Cape Kennedy in Florida on January 15, 1972. They may only be 6 months out, but due to time dilation from traveling near the speed of light, the chronograph shows an Earth date of March 24, 2673. Taylor gives himself an injection in preparation for cryogenic sleep. Before turning in, he glances at his fellow astronauts, Dodge, played by Jeff Burton, and Landon, played by Robert Gunner. He gazes longingly at Lieutenant Stewart, the only female astronaut aboard. She is played by the lovely 22-year-old Diane Stanley. I find it odd that they're attempting to populate a distant planet with 3 Adams and only 1 Eve. Then I discovered that the Stewart character was originally written as a man. Talk about weird. Taylor straps himself in for cryogenic sleep, and they roll the credits. Following the credits, the spacecraft flies over a barren desert landscape and crashes into a lake. The spaceship's splashdown was shot at Lake Powell. The filming site, called Crossing of the Fathers, is north of the Utah-Arizona border. The men, who are now sporting neatly trimmed beards, not scruffy like mine, wake up in their cryopads. Landon jumps down from his upper bunk to quickly discover that he's a bit unsteady on his feet after his months-long sleep. Taylor calls out to Stewart, and when she doesn't answer, they find her decaying body in her damaged cryochamber. For this scene, the production crew had made a mask of Diana Stanley's face, which they aged for use on the mannequin. But the director wasn't satisfied with the final result, so he decided to use an unnamed 83-year-old extra as the aged corpse of Lieutenant Stewart. What sounds like a scream is the sound of the bulkhead under pressure. It buckles, spraying water into the ship. For the reverse shots of Stewart floating away when the ship is sinking, they did that using that mannequin. Because of that, there's a bit of a continuity error. Both actresses had folded their arms for their shots, but the mannequin's arms were down at the sides, not folded. Dodge checks the outside air composition. I don't know if I'd have bothered, since if the atmosphere is not breathable, they'll suffocate, but if they stay in the ship, they'll drown. While he's checking, we get a good look at some nice aerial footage of the Lake Mead landscape. When Taylor gives the word to abandon ship, Dodge deploys a raft. It seems to be a bit small for a crew of 4. Remember, Lieutenant Stewart was supposed to be there. They'd have been in a bit of a pickle if Lieutenant Stewart hadn't died in her chamber. On his way out, Taylor glances back at the chronometer. The Earth date is November 25th, 3978. Landon asks Taylor if he knows where they are, but then he admits to himself that Taylor didn't have time to read the tapes. So, no, Taylor can't know where they are. But it's strange how Taylor keeps mum when Landon mentions when they are. Taylor does know that. They paddle ashore and Taylor instructs Dodge to do a soil check. Taylor checks their supplies and he says they've got enough food and water for 3 days.
How long is a day? That's a good question.
Taylor and Landon provide some explanatory dialogue to catch the film's audience up on the theory of time dilation. 2,000 years have passed back on Earth while they've been traveling at near light speed for about 18 months. Dodge reports his soil sample findings to his skipper.
Nothing will grow here.
They're about to set off on foot. Taylor glances back, and he sees Landon planting a miniature U.S. flag on the beach. I guess it does seem somewhat absurd to place a flag claiming a planet on behalf of a country on a distant world. What's to say the United States would still exist then? Anyway, Taylor's being a real jerk, especially to Landon. The desert scenes were the first ones filmed. The production crew had considered several other shooting locations before settling on these sites. Monument Valley was rejected right away. It was deemed to be too recognizable after so many Western films had been shot there. Most of the early scenes were shot near the Grand Canyon and several other locations near Page, Arizona. To reach these desolate locations, the crew had to carry their equipment on foot or by mule team. They began filming on May 22nd. Several of the film crew members passed out from the Arizona heat, including the director, Franklin J. Schaffner. The sequels would wisely film their desert scenes in the winter months. A lot of the time is spent following the astronauts through that desert. At one point, when Taylor starts riding Landon, the man argues back. Who on earth decided to put these two together for such a lengthy space mission?
Taylor, over here!
Dodge calls out. They all go running. I found it distracting that their footsteps in the sand during this scene sounded more like walking on a hardwood floor. That was a bad choice by the Foley artists, in my opinion. It seems that Dodge has discovered plant life. And, of course, as learned scientific explorers, their first instinct is to snatch it right out of the ground. I guess I understand their excitement about finding the plant, but shouldn't the main question be, is it edible? Or, what may be more important here, can Taylor smoke it? I'm going to assume that they'd traveled for days, even though there are no night scenes. Not even a day-for-night shot. They also never answered the previous question about how long is a day. The astronauts don't notice something that is shown to us, the viewers. A couple of humanoids are running along a rock ridge high above them. They are being watched. As jazzed as they were to find that little plant a bit earlier, they should have been jumping for joy now, because they're walking past trees and shrubs of every kind. They're not even looking at those. Then Landon sees something of interest, and he calls the skipper over.
Skipper! Look!
They're viewing figures that appear to be fur-covered bodies stretched out into the shape of an X. The three men seem unaware that they're standing in foliage that reaches up to their necks at this point.
Scarecrow?
Landon suggests that those figures may be scarecrows. Whatever they are, they must indicate some sort of intelligent life exists here. They start climbing for a better look, and when Taylor gets to the crest of a hill, he sees a tree. So what? I just mentioned that there were trees and plants all over the place just a minute ago. Well, Taylor says to hell with the scarecrows. The studio wanted to cut that to make the scene more family-friendly, but by 1968, hell was even being spoken on TV.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Regardless of what he saw up ahead, I would think he might be a bit more cautious after seeing those ominous scarecrows. They come to a waterfall, and they all immediately strip down to bathe in that cool water. It's Charlton Heston's first nude scene. In fact, this is one of only a few G-rated films to feature nudity. The Fox Ranch pool where the men go skinny dipping was built a year earlier for the filming of Dr. Dolittle. My VHS copy, recorded from Superstation TBS, doesn't include the nude scene, and I'm assuming CBS didn't show it in 1974. Landon finds a human footprint on the shore. All three gather in a semicircle to examine it. While their backs are turned, some natives take their clothing, equipment, and their other supplies. They take off after those thieves, and I find the score here very similar to that of a Star Trek episode. Charlton Heston's stunt double had to run naked through some poison oak during some of these scenes. They find their items are scattered and destroyed. The men do locate a few articles of clothing that upholds their G rating. The three see a group of primitive humanoids gathering food. In the original script, the female natives were all bare-breasted. That idea was shot down by the studio to satisfy the censors. The three men watch the natives. Taylor makes an observation about them.
They look more or less human. I think they're mute.
He spies an attractive female native. Ursula Andress, Raquel Welch, and Angelique Pettyjohn were all seriously considered for the role of Charlton Heston's native love interest in this film. Linda Harrison, who got the role, was having an affair with Fox Studio president Richard D. Zanuck at the time.
Linda Harrison was born in Berlin, Maryland on July 26, 1945. Her mother enrolled her in ballet and acrobatics classes at the age of 5. A year later she started performing on stage. She won talent and beauty contests with her heart set on becoming a star. She graduated high school and started classes at the University of Maryland. She dropped out and spent some time in New York, where she did some modeling. Thinking that entering beauty contests would get her noticed, she entered the Miss Maryland contest. Winning that, she then went on to compete for Miss America, where she was the runner-up. The pageant did get her noticed by a talent agent, and she was signed to 20th Century Fox Studios. She began dating studio head Richard D. Zanuck around the time Planet of the Apes was in production. The two were married from 1968 until they divorced in 1978. She has appeared in a handful of films and TV shows over the years. She was given a small part in the 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes. Linda Harrison was last reported to be living on the Maryland coast.
Landon is bummed out to be here.
We got off the wrong stop.
Why? What was he expecting to find on a strange world?
Look on the bright side. This is the best they've got around here. In 6 months, we'll be running this planet.
Then everybody stops what they're doing and things get very quiet. There's a loud roaring sound, and all of the natives start to run. The astronauts run too. They're in a field with rows of tall plants similar to corn back here on Earth. Sticks go whipping back and forth, driving the natives. Then there's rifle fire. Taylor jumps out of the way just in time as 2 gorillas on horseback gallop past and stop. It's an abrupt, exciting introduction to the apes who rule this planet. Landon is captured. Dodge gets shot in the back of the head after escaping from a net. Taylor comes across the body of Dodge, and then he's shot in the neck. Injured, Taylor is carried off to a caged wagon. The other captured humans being held there include the female he'd admired. The dead humans are being hung up much the way we would hang game after a hunting expedition. 3 gorillas pose for a photograph standing next to a pile of dead humans. That's the last thing Taylor sees before he loses consciousness. While he's unconscious, he is taken for medical help.
The animal has lost a lot of blood. A kind doctor is performing a transfusion from that human female. Dr. Galen is being played by Wright King.
Wright King was born in Oklahoma on January 11, 1923. He studied acting at the St. Louis School of Theater, graduating in 1941. He enlisted and served in the South Pacific with the U.S. Navy during World War II. His first screen role was as Midshipman Bascom on the Captain video in his Video Rangers TV series in 1949. He continued acting on television, and he was also cast in films such as the 1951 hit A Streetcar Named Desire. He was never considered a star, but the supporting actor chalked up more than 100 screen appearances. After more than 30 years in Hollywood, King retired and moved to Portland, Oregon in 1987. Wright King died of old age on November 25, 2018. He was 95.
Dr. Zira, a female chimpanzee, enters. A human named Ingrid Bergman turned down the role of Zira. It's one of her greatest regrets, I'm told. The role went to Kim Hunter.
Kim Hunter was born Janet Cole on November 12, 1922 in Detroit, Michigan. She was extremely shy as a child, which she overcame with the direction of a drama teacher. After attending Miami Beach High, Janet studied at New York's Actors Studio and Pasadena Playhouse. An RKO Pictures talent scout caught her appearance in a 1942 production of Arsenic and Old Lace. He signed her to a 7-year contract. David O. Selznick suggested she change her first name to Kim. Then an RKO secretary suggested the last name of Hunter, and actress Kim Hunter hit the ground running. Kim won an Oscar for her role as Stella in the 1951 film A Streetcar Named Desire, reprising her first Broadway role. Miss Hunter was blacklisted from film and television for suspicions of communism by the House Un-American Activities Committee. The bans were lifted by 1957, and her career continued. She did scores of TV shows, films, and daytime soaps. She won an Emmy for her role as Nola Madison on the ABC daytime drama The Edge of Night. Kim Hunter died at the age of 79 on September 11, 2002.
I can only imagine what it would be like to wake up to find another species talking about me. And they speak the same language. Miss Hunter reportedly found the prosthetic so claustrophobic that she had to take a Valium each morning before being made up as Zira. She went without it one day, and it was a disaster. The ape actors were required to wear their masks even during breaks. Their meals were liquefied, and they had to be taken through straws. Kim Hunter found this too difficult. She just gave up eating while in their full makeup. A lot of the actors were smokers back then. Those smokers had to use cigarette holders. Taylor, who Zira calls Bright Eyes, tries to speak. Humans can't speak. They say the throat injury has affected his vocal cords. Heresy. Zira says that Bright Eyes is trying to form words. There's an old adage, human see, human do. The role of the keeper, Julius, is played by Buck Kartalian.
Buck Kartalian was born in Detroit on August 13, 1922. His family moved to New York City when Buck was 2 years old. After a stint in the U.S. Navy aboard a destroyer in the Pacific during World War II, Buck became a pro wrestler. He caught the eye of some Broadway producers, who talked him into becoming an actor. He found work in Hollywood, appearing in more than 70 film and television productions in a 5-decades-long career. Buck Kartalian died at the age of 93 on May 24, 2016.
When the human tries to grab a notepad from Zira, Julius pushes him back with his broom. Yes! An orangutan enters the facility. His Excellency Dr. Zaius is played by Maurice Evans. You humans may remember him as Samantha Stevens' father on Bewitched.
English-born actor Maurice Evans was born in Dorchester on June 3, 1901. He made his first appearance on stage as a small boy. His adult stage debut was at the Cambridge Festival Theatre in 1926. This led to years of playing Shakespeare in London, and then it was off to Broadway in 1936. He became an American citizen in 1941 and he joined the U.S. Army, producing a GI version of Hamlet. After the war, Major Evans returned to Broadway in both an acting and a producing capacity. He always insisted that his name be pronounced Morris, as they do in England. Ironically, when he played Samantha's father on Bewitched, they pronounced the name Maurice. His second most notable role is as Dr. Zaius in the Planet of the Apes franchise. He returned to England to retire, where he lived until his death on March 12, 1989 at the age of 87.
Yul Brynner, Jose Ferrer, Sir Alec Guinness, Edmund O'Brien, Sir Laurence Olivier, and Peter Houston, as well as Orson Welles, were all considered for the part of Dr. Zaius. Zira brings that human female in to be a mate for Taylor, Bright Eyes. We cut to Taylor and the human female in a large outdoor communal cage. Dr. Cornelius is greeted by his fiancée, Dr. Zira. They share a kiss when no one is looking. Dr. Cornelius is played by Roddy McDowall.
Roddy McDowall was born in London on September 17, 1928. He began modeling as a baby, and by age 10 he was already appearing on film. His movie career was interrupted by the outbreak of World War II. His parents moved to the United States in 1940. Their teenager McDowall appeared in the Academy Award-winning How Green Was My Valley in 1941. Another notable role was the lead in Lassie Come Home, which introduced young teen Elizabeth Taylor. He signed a contract and played in 7 low-budget films from a studio known as Monogram Pictures. Roddy became a naturalized U.S. citizen in 1949 and he served in the U.S. Army Reserves. He moved to New York to concentrate on theater productions. He also started appearing on TV. In 1963, McDowall played Octavian in the film rendition of Cleopatra, starring his old friend Liz Taylor. He was bouncing from Hollywood to Broadway and back throughout the 1960s. He's most remembered for appearing in The Planet of the Apes, 3 of its sequels, and the TV series. He remained busy acting, directing, and doing voice work until his death at age 70 on October 3, 1998.
Both Roddy McDowall and Kim Hunter had spent time studying apes in preparation for their roles. Cornelius is disinterested, as he should be, when she points out Bright Eyes. Taylor starts pretending to write in the dirt as Dr. Zaius shows up. We find out that Cornelius is an ape archaeologist during this dialogue. While Taylor is trying to get their attention, pointing to his scribbles, his mate and another male human start to erase the marks that Taylor had made in the dirt. Taylor tries to stop them, which elicits a fight inside the cage. She must know that it will get him into trouble. I'm not sure of the other human's motivation. Maybe he was just playing around as humans tend to do. Taylor is chastised with a hot torch for fighting, and he's taken back inside. Afterward, Dr. Zaius obliterates the remnants of Taylor's scribblings with his walking stick. Inside, Zira sends Julius for some burn ointment. When Taylor snatches Zira's notepad, Julius swiftly and brilliantly beats the human with a club to get it for her. Way to go, Julius. When Zira sees what Taylor has written, she tells Julius to get her a collar and a leash. Later, when Cornelius sees the notes that Taylor has written, he sees it for the stunt that it must be. It is a stunt. It's a stunt. Asked where he learned to write, Taylor writes, Jefferson Public School, Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Back on that planet you say you came from?
Taylor's paper airplane doesn't prove flight. It's as if he'd never seen a leaf float to the ground after falling from a tree. Taylor then wants to see a map, and Cornelius obliges. Take a good look at that map for further discussion later on. I shared Taylor's reaction when Zira explained Cornelius's hypothesis that apes may have evolved from a lower form of life, possibly man. They are talking heresy. The idea of ape evolution goes against the writings of the sacred scrolls. Dr. Zaius barges in with another orangutan. He is Dr. Maximus, the Commissioner of Animal Affairs. Dr. Maximus is played by Woodrow Parfrey.
Woodrow Parfrey was born in New York City to Welsh immigrants on October 5, 1922. He was orphaned as a teenager and suffered in poverty during the Depression. He worked as an auto mechanic before going into the army during World War II. He was captured by German forces after being wounded during the Battle of the Bulge in 1944. After the war, Woodrow looked to stage acting and he quickly made it to Broadway. He started performing on television in the early days when most shows were produced in New York. He made his way to Hollywood to continue acting on television, and he also did some films. His best-known film roles were in Planet of the Apes, Papillon, Dirty Harry, and The Outlaw Josey Wales. Woodrow Parfrey had more than 200 roles to his credit. He continued acting until his death from a heart attack on July 29, 1984. He was 61 years old.
Dr. Maximus orders the human to be returned to the compound. At last, someone with some brains. Dr. Zaius finds the paper airplane and he destroys it. Later on, Taylor is snuggling with that female companion. A couple of gorillas come looking for him. They're taking him to be gelded. Julius reluctantly grabs a collar and a leash for Taylor. When he enters the cage, Taylor overpowers him and knocks him out, as if that would happen. I feel sorry for Julius. He was only following orders. Taylor bolts, leaving that prospective mate behind, just like a human. Most of the scenes in the ape village were filmed on the Fox Ranch in Malibu Creek State Park. It proved to be a lot less costly to construct these primitive stone buildings than it would have been to create a more modern ape city with cars, etc. Taylor interrupts an ape funeral ceremony. Sacrilege. And I'm surprised at how easily the human overpowers so many apes. This is total fiction. No matter how many times I've watched this scene, I'm always fooled into thinking he's going to jump on that horse. Of course, he's a human, so... no brains. He hides out in a museum. I have a few gripes about the scene where he finds Dodge in the museum. 1. How did he recognize Dodge from behind? 2. Why did they make that gorilla such a bad shot? I mean, he missed him by at least 3 feet. In a whole village full of apes, Taylor is quite outnumbered. It's just a matter of time before he's bound to get caught. Taylor's famous line,
Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
was originally written as "Stand back, you bloody ape." It just doesn't have the same impact. Back in his cage with the female, Taylor is very talkative, so much so that she tries to stop him by covering his mouth with her hand. Good girl. He names her Nova for some reason. Some gorillas come in and spray Taylor with a hose so they can remove Nova. While filming this scene, Charlton Heston felt ill. It was made even worse by being sprayed with the fire hose. Julius is sure having a good time spraying him, though. This brings us to another iconic quote. When things quiet down, Taylor starts rambling. He mentions Stuart and how she was to be the new Eve. Taylor is removed from his cage. He's taken to appear before a tribunal. The presiding president of the assembly is played by James Whitmore.
James Whitmore Jr. was born in White Plains, New York on October 1, 1921. A football injury kept Jimmy off the turf, so he turned toward the stage and college radio. He earned a bachelor's degree from Yale University and he served in the Marines in World War II. Following the war, he studied acting on the GI Bill, which led to appearances on Broadway. MGM placed him under contract when they saw him in a Broadway version of Command Decision. He was hoping to reprise his role in the film adaptation, but the part was assigned to Van Johnson. James won a Golden Globe and was nominated for an Oscar for his supporting role in Battleground, his debut film at MGM. One of his most recognizable roles was when he played Admiral William Bull Halsey in the 1970 film Tora Tora Tora. In his 6 decades of acting, James Whitmore chalked up a Golden Globe, a Grammy, an Emmy, a Tony, and 2 Oscar nominations. James Whitmore was active until his lung cancer diagnosis in November of 2008, and he died on February 6, 2009 at the age of 87.
The other orangutans present are Dr. Maximus, Dr. Zaius, and the prosecutor, Dr. Honorius, played by James Daly.
James Daly was born on October 23, 1918 in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. With the encouragement of his parents, James first appeared on stage at the age of 10. He studied drama in college, but an acting career would have to wait until after the war. Somehow he managed to serve 6 months in the infantry and 2 months as an Air Force cadet before serving 4 years as a Navy ensign. He quickly rose to fame on the stage, starring in Period of Adjustment on Broadway. He found regular work on television throughout the 1950s, and he spent 7 years as the spokesperson for R.J. Reynolds' Camel Cigarettes brand. He made some movies, and he played Dr. Paul Lochner on 171 episodes of Medical Center before suffering heart failure. James Daly died on July 3, 1978 at the age of 59.
During the trial, they take Taylor outside to identify his lost companion, Landon. Taylor sees his fellow astronaut. I'd almost said friend, but that would be a stretch. Taylor calls out to him. He approaches to find that Landon's brain has been experimented on.
You did it. Cut up his brain, you funny baboon.
Taylor is dragged back to the tribunal chamber. Cornelius and Zira, attempting to help Taylor for some reason, find themselves accused of heresy, as well they should be. The famous see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil gag was ad-libbed during filming. No human would think of that. It wasn't intended for the final film, but it was left in based on some test screenings. Earth humans found it to be amusing when the film was getting a bit serious. Later, Taylor is brought to Dr. Zaius' office, but the doctor is unsuccessful in his attempts to get Taylor to give him information.
Late that night, a young chimp comes to Julius. He says he's from the Office of Animal Affairs, and that he's to transfer the human to a zoo. It's all a hoax, however, as the young chimp was sent by his Aunt Zira to break Taylor out. He's Lucius, played by Lou Wagner.
Lou Wagner was born on August 19, 1940 in San Jose, California. He started acting on stage as a teen. His short stature and high-pitched voice led to roles playing characters much younger than he was. One of his most notable roles was as the teenage chimpanzee Lucius in the 1968 film Planet of the Apes. He played juveniles on 4 different Dragnet episodes, 2 in 1968 and 2 in 1969. The 30-year-old was called upon to play a boy of 15 traveling with his parents on the 1970 film Airplane. But he is probably best known as the geeky mechanic Harlan Arliss on the 1978 NBC series Chips. Lou Wagner and Linda Harrison are the only 2 survivors from the Planet of the Apes cast. Lou Wagner is 84 years old.
Lucius knocks Julius out. Poor Julius. Against Zira's wishes, Taylor insists on taking Nova along this time. Zira meets them with a wagon. It's a long ride to meet Cornelius. Well, they're all fugitives now. You will be hunted down and made to pay. Taylor helps himself to a rifle and borrows a knife to cut off his collar. It's a 3-day ride to the Forbidden Zone. It will be easier now that they're on horseback. At one point, they use a blue screen effect to put Taylor and Lucius on one side of the Grand Canyon and Cornelius on the other. Not only is that visual effect terribly executed, But it begs the question, how did they get across the canyon from each other? They eventually reach the archaeological site that Cornelius had mentioned. Nova watches as Taylor uses a sharp knife to scrape the fur off his face.
Somehow, it makes you look less intelligent.
They are about to enter a cave when Zira calls out to them. Dr. Zaius and a troop of gorillas are coming. Cornelius leads them into the cave where they find advanced technology among some human artifacts that date from before the sacred scrolls are written. Dr. Zaius tries to explain everything away. Meanwhile, the gorillas ambush Lucius, who is outside standing guard. After a brief gunfight, Taylor is sent on his way. Zaius has the cave destroyed. The chimpanzees will now have to be tried for heresy. The scenes of Taylor and Nova riding along the shoreline on horseback were filmed on the coast near Malibu, California. The area was inaccessible, such that everyone and everything, even the horses, had to be flown in by helicopter. They approach something overwhelming. Buried chest deep in the sandy beach is an icon of Taylor's past. It's the Statue of Liberty. Taylor realizes that he's back on Earth, which, over time, has become a planet of the apes.
Oh my God. I'm back. I'm home. Oh, maniac! You blew it up! Damn you all to hell!
What else can I say about such an iconic classic film that led to so many follow-up films, a TV series, an animated series, reboots and remakes abound? It's just an amazing film. I've done reviews of a few films where NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, had allowed their emblem and patches to be used. Well, either NASA refused to allow it for this film, or the producers just didn't bother to ask the agency, because the uniform patches say ANSA, A-N-S-A, and who knows what that's supposed to stand for. Maybe NASA didn't want to be associated with a film that was about deep space missions, taking place in 1972, when by 1968 we had yet to venture beyond the moon. I didn't want to spoil the ending too soon, so I kept this tidbit for the end. Remember when Taylor asked to look at the map? Did it look somewhat familiar to any of you? It was drawn from a map of Newark, New York, and Long Island, with Long Island Sound prominent. Cornelius points to where they are.
We're here.
That's near the Delaware State Forest. He points to where Taylor was captured, and that's somewhere near the area of West Point. Taylor indicates that they've splashed down in Long Island Sound. Their raft came ashore in the Forbidden Zone, somewhere near New Haven, Connecticut. While Cornelius and Zira were talking to Taylor in her room, I noticed the windows in the background, and I was reminded that these ape village sets were inspired by the town of Bedrock from the Flintstones TV show. Jefferson Public School, Fort Wayne, Indiana, is a real place. In the scene where Taylor yanks a gorilla off his horse by grabbing his whip, that's certainly Charlton Heston's stunt double. It's so obvious that I even noticed it on my fuzzy VHS copy. In my opinion, they should have framed it so that they didn't show his face. Charlton Heston was very sick with the flu during much of this production. Rather than waiting for him to get better, the producers felt that his hoarseness added a little more character to Taylor. When censors attempted to have the final scene edited for its profanity, Charlton Heston argued that his character was actually asking God to damn those responsible for the destruction of the world. Therefore, he didn't use the Lord's name in vain. The profanity was cut by TBS when I recorded the movie from their channel. In some of the drafts, Taylor was killed by an ape sniper and Nova escaped alone. And at one point it was decided that Nova would be pregnant with Taylor's child. Some scenes were even filmed around that idea before it was shot down. It's said that a Fox studio executive found the storyline to be distasteful for several reasons. Anyway, all of the scenes in the sequence of Nova's pregnancy were cut. Well, that's all I have for this one. Remember to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell, and be sure to leave some comments below. Watch for my next episode of Old Joe's Reminiscence.